Right, well, President Cyril Ramaphosa has made a commitment that all those who seek to continue to act against corruption and state capture as whistleblowers will be protected by the state. This in accordance with the recommendations made of the State Capture Commission report, which the President tabled in front of Parliament on Sunday. Ramaphosa says that the role played by whistleblowers cannot be downplayed, for it assisted a great deal in covering the rot caused by state capture in South Africa. He says that whistleblowers need to be encouraged to report any instances of fraud and corruption. The President has committed that the protection of whistleblowers is top of government's priorities moving forward. Let's take this discussion forward. Then we're now joined by John Clark, who is a social worker and justice monitor working with whistleblowers, journalists and activists to weigh in on government's response to the recommendations of the state capture inquiry. A very good afternoon to you, sir. Thanks very much for joining us here on SABC News.
Thank you so much.
All right, well, it seems that the President did applaud the role of whistleblowers, the fact that they played an important role or part in this inquiry. First of all, let's talk about your thoughts on these recommendations and certainly, what you have to say about the role of whistleblowers as was spoken about by the President last night.
Well, I mean, it's lovely to hear him say this, but we heard it before, and we heard it 2 years ago. We've heard it from Judge Zondo, and I have to confess that the Whistleblower for Positive Change group that I work with were not particularly encouraged, and some of them were actually particularly angry at the fact that it's one thing to have a solution or identify a problem, but then a solution needs to be implemented. And over the period that's now lapsed over the last year or two, we haven't seen things improve. I have now got clients, whistleblower clients, who are currently in hiding, who have to wear bulletproof vests when they walk around because they are in hiding from, and of all places, whistleblowers inside the South African Police Services. We've got a whistleblower in the National Prosecuting Authority who is desperately asking me to help him to go to court so he can actually testify at the corruption charge against his boss. And we wanted to see a more sense of urgency. I think that's the point to be made.
Yeah. A question that I've always had when it comes to the topic of whistleblowers is, how do we tell the difference between a whistleblower who legitimately acts in a legitimate manner and has good intentions, and perhaps someone who only speaks out, maybe they've been cut out of a deal because so often they have so much inside information that one could argue that they know this because they were involved and maybe some way cut out and they feel aggrieved and that's why they're speaking. So it might not always be the sort of righteous act, and how do we differentiate between those who are acting righteously and those who feel sore because they were cut out of something?
Well, I mean, it's an ongoing debate, and I was just chatting with a friend who's a researcher on international anti-corruption strategy globally, and she was telling me that the only jurisdiction which has successfully seemed to be getting a handle on protection and support for whistleblowers is the United States, because they actually incentivize whistleblowing. I mean, we're not asking for saints and heroes. We're asking for ordinary citizens to be able to just be enabled to just do their jobs professionally and not to experience retaliation. I think the more important issue is why still, after all the time that's elapsed, we have got state-owned entities still using state money, taxpayers' money, to retaliate against whistleblowers, trying to make exactly that case. Oh, but there's no smoke without fire. There must be something still that they're trying to hide. And I've seen, from my perspective as a social worker trying to support these folk, I go to the disciplinary hearings. It's just the most shocking thing to still see happening today. is that we still have this retaliation strategy. I call it a slow suit, strategic litigation on whistleblowers. So for goodness sake, let's stop talking about whether in fact whistleblowers are genuine or not. Let's start saying, is the state genuine about wanting to throw off the grave clothes of state capture?
Yeah.
Is it really wanting to pursue an inclusivity now, or is it still basically, as are the writers of that wonderful book, Why Nations Fail, a state that's captured and that the institutions of state are used for extractive purposes, and that's still going on.
Yeah. All right. You talk about incentivizing, and I'd really like to understand what you mean by that. I mean, which incentive is worth one's life? I mean, if one is to look at, Babita Deokaran, who was murdered in the south of Johannesburg and seen as someone who was going to be a whistleblower, people will look at that. Potential whistleblowers might look at that and say, nothing is actually worth my life. So when you're talking about it, incentivizing, in what way? I mean, I think you referred to what they do in America. I'd like to understand what you mean and how it could or would be implemented here in South Africa.
Well, I would say that I've just got back recently from counseling a whistleblower from Malawi who blew the whistle on corruption in South Sudan. So it's now going beyond. And I got a very interesting insight there. Yeah. This guy was prepared to spend 16 months in prison because he knew he wasn't guilty, because he said the truth mattered more than his life. He did not want to die and go to the grave feeling that he had compromised. He's got young children. He's trying to do his job. So why do I keep doing this job? Because I have people like this who really know that the truth will set us free, and that we must be prepared to basically sacrifice whatever it takes to ensure that that truth does prevail.
Yeah. All right. Thanks very much for giving us your time then, John Clark, who's a social worker and whistleblower advocate. We appreciate your time. Thank you.